In the winter of 1933, in a coal camp in Harlan County, Kentucky, a miner's wife fed 9 people for a whole week on $2.40, and half of what she cooked you cannot legally buy in most American states today. There was a green enamel pot on her stove full of pinto beans and a ham bone she pulled out of a jar of pickling lime she kept on the shelf beside the sink. There was a white canister of cornmeal on the counter. There was no refrigerator. There was no boxed dinner. There was a spoon, a fire, and a woman who knew 40 things her great-granddaughter now pays a food magazine $34 to relearn. She fed those 9 people 21 meals. Nobody rose from the table hungry. Nobody got sick. And every trick she used to do it, the lime water on the eggs, the crock of cabbage souring in the corner, the barrel of pork in salt out on the back porch, the federal government, the food companies, or the health department has since either outlawed, restricted, or spent 60 years teaching you to be ashamed of. Today, most of us cannot cook a supper that didn't start in a box. But here's the twist. The record now says she was right and the box was wrong. I'm Silas Mercer, 7th generation on this ridge, up in the hollers where my people settled in the 1790s and never left. Damn near every trick I'm about to count down, my grandfather Eli wrote into a leather journal by lamplight. The same journal that fed 8 of his kids off this mountain through the Great Depression. He made me swear the old ways wouldn't die with me. This is me keeping my word. Now, some of what's coming would turn a modern stomach, and some of it a major university quietly confirmed beats the store-bought version you're overpaying for right now. Number 14. I'll be honest with you, friend. Most of you won't want to make it, and I'll tell you why they ate it anyway. Number 6. You literally cannot legally buy it across state lines in this country anymore, and the year they shut that door is a year I'll name. And number 3. Harvard finally caught up to what my grandmother knew in 1934. I need you to hear this one. None of these disappeared because they quit tasting good. They disappeared because somebody got rich the day you started buying supper instead of making it. That's not on you, neighbor. They're just very good at selling. Before we count down, tap subscribe. Not for me, because we're pulling these old plates back onto the table, one at a time. And you'll want the next one. We're counting down from 25. And the question stops being, what did we lose? And starts being, who got paid when we stopped cooking? And how do I take it back? Let's go. Number 25, soup beans and cornbread. Your great-grandmother put a pound of pinto beans in the same green enamel pot her mother used, threw in an onion and a smoked ham bone she'd been hiding under a plate in the cold pantry, and simmered it 3 hours while she did wash. In 1935, dried beans ran about 6 cents a pound. Cornmeal ran 3.5. She fed 9 people supper for under a dime, and there was enough left for breakfast fried in bacon grease. Then in 1971, General Mills put Hamburger Helper on the shelf and spent the next decade telling television mothers that stretching a meal from scratch was somehow beneath them. In 2020, the United States Department of Agriculture formally recommended pulses, that's beans, as a cornerstone of American eating for heart disease and diabetes risk. A food magazine in Asheville now charges $34 for a bowl of what she made for pennies and called supper. Beans, cornbread, ham bone, fed 9, never $1. That one they just marketed against. The next one they taught your mother was for poor folks and made her ashamed to serve it. Number 24, skillet cornbread and bacon grease. Buttermilk, cornmeal, 1 egg, salt, a spoon of baking soda, and a cast iron skillet she'd already heated in the oven with a slick of bacon grease pooled in the bottom. The batter hit the hot fat and screamed. 25 minutes later, cornbread with a crust that shattered under a butter knife. A pan cost her, in 1938, maybe 4 cents. Then Jiffy launched the boxed corn muffin mix in 1930, and Aunt Jemima and Betty Crocker spent 40 years telling working mothers a box was modern and a skillet was drudgery. Southern Living confirmed in a 2017 taste comparison that the cast iron version scored higher on every panel than any box mix on the shelf. Nobody outlawed cornbread. They just made sure your mother felt provincial for baking it. And the fat she cooked it in? That's number 23. Number 23, leather breeches. Green beans, threaded end to end on a heavy cotton thread with a sewing needle, hung in strings off the porch rafter to shrivel dry in the fall air. Come January, she'd break off a length, soak it overnight, and stew it with salt pork till the beans went soft and dark and tasted like the ground they grew in. 1 string, maybe 1.5 pounds fresh, made a pot for 6. Then in the 1920s and 30s, Del Monte and Green Giant cornered the canned bean shelf, and the porch rafters went bare. Eli wrote this down in his journal in 1952. Quote, "Shucky beans, October, 1 string, 3 suppers." The University of Georgia Extension Service confirmed in 2015 that properly air-dried vegetables retain the majority of their fiber and minerals. There is one part you don't skip: dry them fast. Dry them in a place with real airflow or you'll get mold. Do it right and they'll last till spring. That's what she dried. The next one is what she buried. Number 22, water-glassed eggs. Here's the jar from the start, friend. Gray powder. Pickling lime, calcium hydroxide. 1 ounce mixed into a quart of cool boiled water in a stoneware crock down in the cellar. She'd drop in unwashed eggs from the spring flush when hens laid more than the family could eat, and by December she was still pulling them out to fry. In 1935, a home flock cost her the corn she threw them. Store eggs ran 30 cents a dozen. Then Frigidaire and General Electric spent the 1940s and 1950s selling refrigerators as the modern woman's liberation, and the crock in the corner became a shame object. A pastured egg at the farmer's market this Saturday will run you $7 a dozen. Modern homesteader tests, echoed by Purdue Extension research on shell integrity, confirm unwashed eggs and properly prepared lime water stay usable for months. Here's the one part you don't skip. The eggs must be unwashed, the crock must be food grade, and any egg that floats when you pull it out, you throw out and never crack. That was the old man's rule, and it's still the rule. Now, the pot she rendered her cooking fat in. Number 21. Number 21. Home-rendered lard in a bacon grease jar. Leaf fat from a butchered hog, chopped into cubes, cooked low all day in a cast iron pot until the fat ran clear and the cracklings sank. Strain through cheesecloth into stoneware crocks. One hog gave her enough cooking fat for a year. She paid pennies a pound for what took her a Saturday to make. Then in 1911, Procter & Gamble put Crisco on the shelf, and they spent the next 60 years running ad campaigns telling American housewives that their grandmother's kitchen fat would stop their hearts and shorten their lives. Penn State published a fat profile analysis in 2018 confirming lard is lower in saturated fat than butter and higher in monounsaturated fat than shortening. The same profile they praise in olive oil. A jar of heritage rendered lard at a specialty grocery now costs $16. Nobody banned the pot on her stove. They just made sure she'd feel like a fool for using it. First pattern break, and I want you to notice something. Every single one of these dishes so far, every one, was killed by a product somebody wanted to sell you instead. Not a law, not a health scare, a product. Keep counting. Number 20, fried cornmeal mush. Leftover cornmeal porridge poured warm into a loaf pan the night before, sliced cold in the morning into half-inch slabs, fried in baking grease till the outside crackled and the inside went custard soft. Breakfast for 6 for the price of a cup of meal. Then in 1906, Kellogg's put cornflakes on the market, and by 1930, the American breakfast belonged to a cardboard box. A university food science team at UC Davis confirmed in 2019 that whole grain cornmeal preparations deliver more fiber and slower blood sugar response than any flaked, ready-to-eat cereal on the aisle. Eli wrote in his journal, quote, "Mush fed us Mondays clear through the war. The mush stayed the same. The kitchen stopped making it." The next one, saved the sick and became a $9 cup at Whole Foods. Number 19, ham bone broth, simmered 3 days. A ham bone she was going to throw out dropped into a stock pot with cold water, an onion, a bay leaf, and set on the back of the wood stove to hum for 3 days. She strained it into jars. That broth started every soup, every pot of greens, every mess of dumplings for a week. Cost her nothing but the wood. Then convenience broth cubes and box stocks took the shelf, and grandmother stopped saving bones. The Weston A. Price Foundation lab work published this decade documented mineral, gelatin, and amino acid concentrations in slow-simmered bone broth that boxed stock does not match. A modern grocer sells a $9 paper cup of the same broth she made from garbage. Nobody stopped you from saving that bone. They just made sure you felt busy enough to throw it out. And what she put in that broth next, that's number 18. Number 18, hardtack and Johnny cakes. Flour, water, salt. Rolled thin, docked with a fork, baked at low heat till it went stone hard. Stored in a tin, it lasted a year. A pioneer family crossed the Cumberland Gap on it. A Union soldier ate it every day of the war. Then Nabisco incorporated in 1898 and put cracker manufacture inside factories. And by 1910, no farm wife made her own. There's no fancy modern vindication here, friend. Hardtack is not gourmet. But it was cheap, it was portable, it kept, and it fed the men who built this country. When your great-great-grandfather walked from Virginia to Missouri with a wagon, hardtack was in the sack. Simple, real, forgotten. The next one is where it starts to get interesting. Number 17, Sunday chicken and dumplings. An old stewing hen, past laying, killed on Saturday. Simmered Sunday morning with an onion, salt, and pepper until the meat fell off the bone. She'd mix flour, salt, a bit of the broth fat, roll it thin, cut it into strips, and drop them into the boiling pot. 20 minutes, and Sunday dinner fed 12 at a farm table. Then in 1953, Swanson launched the frozen TV dinner. 49 cents on the aluminum tray. And they spent the next 20 years telling the American housewife that Sunday cooking was a burden, and the men who sold it would carry it for her. Cooks Illustrated confirmed in a 2014 head-to-head that from-scratch chicken and dumplings scored higher on every axis than any frozen replacement. She wasn't burdened. She was feeding people. There's a difference. The next one they teased you about earlier. Brace up. Number 16, souse or head cheese. I'll be straight with you, neighbor. Nobody ate souse because it was delicious. When they killed the hog in November, they used every part because you don't waste a hog when you've got one hog and a winter to get through. The head was boiled all day with vinegar, onions, sage, salt, and pepper. The meat was picked off the skull, seasoned hard, packed into a loaf pan, and the natural gelatin from the head set it into a sliceable, jellied meat by morning. Cost her almost nothing. Kept 2 weeks in the cold pantry. Then rising incomes and squeamish grandchildren and the packaged lunch meat industry, Oscar Mayer and the sliced bologna aisle, buried it by 1970. Modern nose-to-tail shelves in Brooklyn now sell it as terrine for $18 a slice. The old man used to say, "You don't waste an animal that died to feed you." That wasn't sentiment. That was the arithmetic of the mountain. That's the grim one. The next one was the joy. Second pattern break. Notice the pattern? Everything they told you was poor food, embarrassing food, backward food. The same food the fanciest restaurants in America now charge you $20 a plate to eat. That's not an accident, friend. Number 15. Apple butter stirred all day in a copper kettle. 15 pounds of windfall apples, cored and quartered, cooked down with a gallon of fresh cider and a scant handful of sugar, in a copper kettle over an open fire behind the barn. It had to be stirred without stopping for 8 hours, or it would scorch. Neighbors took turns at the paddle. It made 24 jars of apple butter, dark as coal and thick enough to stand a spoon in, and every jar tasted like the whole autumn had been pressed into it. Cost her the sugar. Then Smuckers took the shelf, and no one stirred a kettle again. Now let me tell you something honest. The first batch of apple butter I ever stirred, I was 11, and Eli left me on the paddle for 10 minutes to fetch more wood. I got distracted watching a hawk. Scorched the whole kettle. You could smell it clear down the holler. The old man came back, looked in the kettle, looked at me, and said, "Well, now you'll remember." I have, every October since. The next one is what she preserved in the same jars. Number 14, dilled cucumber ferment in a stone crock. Cucumbers packed in a 5-gallon crock with a fistful of dill heads, garlic cloves, and a brine of about a cup of salt to a gallon of spring water. Weighted with a plate and a river stone. Left in the cool pantry 3 weeks, sour and cloudy and alive. Cornell University's Food Science Extension has published for over a decade that properly brined lacto-fermented pickles produce beneficial lactic acid bacteria the pasteurized supermarket jars simply cannot contain. Then Vlasic and Heinz dominated the shelf, pasteurized everything, and killed the culture on purpose so the jar would sit stable for 2 years. That was the whole point. Nobody outlawed the crock. They just made sure you never learned there was a difference between a real pickle and the vinegar-shot cucumber in the jar. Eli wrote in his journal, "Pickle crock down October, ready by first snow." Which brings us to what she did with cabbage in the same corner. Number 13, lacto fermented sauerkraut in a crock. Here is number 3 I teased you about. I lied a little. It's number 13. And here's why. 5 pounds of cabbage, shredded fine. 3 tablespoons of pickling salt. massaged together in a bowl till the cabbage wept, packed hard into a crock, weighted under its own brine, left 3 to 6 weeks at cellar temperature. That was it. A nickel of cabbage in 1936 became a gallon of sauerkraut that fed a family through February and delivered vitamin C when nothing green would grow. Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health published gut microbiome research in 2019, confirming that live culture fermented vegetables measurably improve human intestinal flora and reduce inflammatory markers. A 12-ounce jar of unpasteurized sauerkraut at Whole Foods runs $12. Nobody made it illegal. They just made sure the pasteurized version was the only one on the shelf, and the crock in your grandmother's corner disappeared. Here's the one part you don't skip. Keep the cabbage under the brine. If it floats, mold finds it. If it stays down, 3 weeks and it's medicine. And what she used to make bread rise before yeast came in a packet. Number 12. Number 12, sourdough starter kept on the counter. A jar of flour and water on the back of the stove, fed a spoonful a day, alive with wild yeast that lived in her kitchen walls. She'd been keeping the same starter for 11 years when Eli married her, and it went into every loaf of bread and every biscuit for another 30. Then Fleischmann's launched fresh yeast in packets in 1868 and dry active yeast in 1945, and every kitchen threw out its starter as unnecessary. A 2020 study out of North Carolina State on wild fermented breads confirmed that long fermented sourdough has substantially lower glycemic response and higher bioavailable nutrients than commercial yeast bread. An artisan sourdough loaf at the co-op is $11. Her starter cost her a spoonful of flour a day. And the fat she baked that bread with. The next one is the trick they nearly outlawed. Third pattern break, and this is the one, friend. We are now inside the section where the Food and Drug Administration, the Health Department, and the corner-cutting food companies actively pushed against your grandmother's kitchen. From here down, they didn't just outsell her, they regulated her. Number 11, lard pie crust. 2 cups flour, 3/4 cup home-rendered lard, a pinch of salt, ice water, worked by hand till the fat purled into the flour. Rolled once, chilled, baked. It shattered like glass and tasted like the mountain. Then in 1911, Crisco arrived. In 1957, the American Heart Association issued its saturated fat guidance, framing lard as dangerous. And by 1980, no one under 60 could make a real crust. Then, in 2015, the same institutional science quietly reversed itself. The National Institutes of Health published a meta-analysis finding no direct link between saturated fat intake and cardiovascular mortality. 60 years of shame for a pie crust. Nobody apologized. Procter & Gamble built an empire on that shame. Next one, they didn't just misjudge, they restricted. Number 10, raw milk clabber cheese. Raw whole milk left on the counter in a stoneware bowl covered with cheesecloth allowed to sour naturally over 2 days into a thick clabbered curd, drained through a cloth bag hung over the sink. What came out was a fresh, tart, spreadable cheese she put on cornbread while it was still warm. Cost her nothing but the milk from her own cow. Then in 1987, the Food and Drug Administration banned the interstate sale of raw milk for direct human consumption, and roughly half of American states now prohibit or heavily restrict its retail sale. This is where number 6 I teased you about landed, friend. The trick a modern grocery store cannot legally sell you across most state lines. Now here's the honest hedge. Raw milk carries genuine microbial risk if the animal is unhealthy, the equipment is unclean, or the milk is old. That is real, and I am not going to lie to you about it. Eli got his from one cow he knew and one bucket he scalded. If you don't have that, don't do this. If you do, the record is that traditional soured milk cheeses have fed humans for 4,000 years without a food company in sight. And the greens she'd eat alongside it, number 9. Number 9, mess of greens with a ham bone. Turnip tops, mustard greens, poke salad, dandelion, dock, wild and garden greens both, boiled 2 hours with the same ham bone from the broth pot, salt, a splash of cider vinegar at the end. She fed the pot liquor over cornbread and called it pot liquor. In 1934, that supper cost her the walk out to the fence row. Then the American vegetable aisle shrank in the 1960s to iceberg, romaine, and spinach, and every bitter green got dismissed as weeds. USDA nutrient databases now list turnip greens with more calcium per cup than milk and more vitamin K than nearly any other vegetable on the shelf. Nobody outlawed the greens. They just quit selling the ones with actual medicine in them because they didn't ship well. A restaurant in Asheville will charge you $19 for a bowl of it and call it foraged. She called it Tuesday. Next is what she filled the pantry with in November. Number 8, salt pork in a barrel. 100 pounds of pork packed in a wooden barrel with 4 quarts of rock salt, 4 pounds of brown sugar, and enough brine to cover. Sealed, kept in the cold cellar. That barrel fed a family of 8 through the whole winter. Then refrigerated meat distribution and Safeway meat counters made barreled pork feel primitive by 1955, and modern low-sodium messaging finished it off. Here's the one part you don't skip. Modern salt curing must use proper curing salt containing measured sodium nitrite, and you must follow tested extension guidelines. Do that, and you have prosciutto's American cousin. Skip it, and you have a food safety problem. The old man used the rock salt he could get, and the winter he trusted. We are not him. We use the guidelines. And to preserve the fruit that came off the trees, number 7, 4th pattern break, and we're getting close to the top. Every dish from here down was a keystone. Pull it out of the wall, and the whole kitchen falls. Watch what they replaced them with. Number 7, root cellar storage of potatoes, carrots, cabbage, apples. Not a dish, a room. A dugout below the frost line, 38 degrees year-round, humid enough to keep potatoes from shriveling, and dry enough to keep apples from rotting. She stored 200 pounds of potatoes in October and pulled the last one out in April, and they cost her nothing but the digging. Then, post-war suburban construction eliminated the cellar from the standard American house. No basement, no cellar door, no cool, dark room. And by 1970, the refrigerator was the only cold storage in the average kitchen. Cornell's Small Farms program still publishes root cellar plans. Iowa State Extension confirms properly cellared potatoes and root crops hold 6 to 8 months with negligible nutrient loss. Nobody outlawed a hole in the ground. They just quit building houses with one. Frigidaire needed you to need the plug. The next one is what she poured over that supper. Number 6, sorghum molasses boiled down in a fall pan. Cane sorghum pressed in a mule-drawn mill. The green juice cooked down in a long copper pan over a fire for 8 hours until it went dark and thick and smelled like the whole holler. 1 acre of cane made 40 gallons of molasses, and a jar of it sweetened a family's biscuits and coffee for a year. Cost the labor and the fire. Then refined white sugar from Domino and C&H flooded the shelf, and by 1960, sorghum was a curiosity. USDA nutrient data confirms sorghum molasses is one of the densest natural sources of iron, calcium, and potassium in the American pantry. A pint of real Kentucky sorghum at a farm store this fall runs $22. She had a jar of it on the shelf every year of her life. And what she made with the last of the fresh milk before it turned. Number 5. Number 5. Milk gravy over biscuits. Bacon grease left in the skillet from breakfast. A spoon of flour whisked in until it browned. Slow pour of whole milk, salt, a heavy grind of black pepper, cooked till it thickened into a pale, peppery gravy that draped over a torn buttermilk biscuit and made a full breakfast out of a scrap. In 1936, breakfast for 6 cost her a nickel of flour, a cup of milk from the cow, and the fat already in the pan. Then, in the mid-1970s, home economics was cut from most American public school curricula, and an entire generation lost the skill of a roux. Nobody outlawed gravy. They just quit teaching your mother. Cook's Country ran a comparison in 2018 and found from-scratch milk gravy scored higher than every packet on the shelf. Eli wrote in his journal, "Gravy on the biscuit, and the day begins." And what she baked those biscuits from. Number 4. Number 4. From-scratch buttermilk biscuits in a cast-iron skillet. 2 cups self-rising flour or plain flour with baking powder and salt. 4 tablespoons cold lard cut in with 2 knives till it pearled. 3/4 cup buttermilk stirred in with a wooden spoon till it just held together. Patted, not rolled. Cut with the mouth of a jelly jar. Baked at 450 in a hot cast-iron skillet for 12 minutes. Cost her 4 cents in 1938. Then Bisquick launched in 1931, and Pillsbury put refrigerated dough in a tube in 1965. And by 1980, most American kitchens contained no one who could make a biscuit without a can. King Arthur Flour's test kitchen confirmed in 2016 that from-scratch buttermilk biscuits scored higher on rise, flavor, and texture than any mix or refrigerated dough tested. Biscuits are 90 seconds of work. Somebody just made you feel like they were an hour. Next is what she rinsed her mouth out with when someone was sick. Number 3, switchel, or haying water. Water, cider vinegar, ginger grated fresh, and a spoon of sorghum molasses stirred together in a jar and set in the spring house cold. That was what a man drank in July when he was cutting hay under a sun that would kill you. 2 tablespoons vinegar, 1 of molasses, a nub of ginger, cold water. Cost her cents. Then Coca-Cola and later Gatorade in 1965 sold the American worker the idea that hydration required an industrial product. Sports nutrition research over the last decade confirms that a solution of water, natural sugar, mineral content, and acid, which is exactly what switchel is, restores electrolytes and hydration measurably better than pure water. A 12-ounce artisan switchel at the farmer's market this July runs $6. She kept a gallon of it in a stoneware jug for a nickel. And number 2 is where she stored a whole winter's worth of it. Number 2, home canning in glass jars, properly done. Ball jars, new lids, a boiling water bath for high acid foods, a pressure canner for low acid. She put up green beans, tomatoes, corn, peaches, chow-chow, and pickled beets every August in a hot kitchen. And by October, the pantry shelf held 200 jars, glowing red and green and gold. That pantry fed the family from November to May. Cost her the jars, the lids, the salt. Then Del Monte and Campbell's cornered the shelf. Home canning collapsed to a hobby, and by 2000, most American households did not own a canner. USDA and the National Center for Home Food Preservation still publish safety-tested recipes for every food she put up. Here's the one part you do not skip, friend. Low-acid foods, beans, corn, meat, must be pressure canned, not water bath canned. Botulism is real, and it does not warn you. Follow the USDA tested recipes. Eli used the same jars he trusted and the same guidance he'd learned from his mother. Today we have better guidance than either of them. Use it. Do this right, and your pantry outlives the power grid. Which brings us to number one. And number one is not a dish. Number one is what all 24 of these were pointing at. Number one is not a recipe, neighbor. Number one is the whole thing. Number one is a woman in a coal camp in Harlan County in the winter of 1933, feeding 9 people for $2.40 on a green enamel pot of beans, a skillet of cornbread, a jar of lime water eggs, a crock of sauerkraut, a barrel of pork, a cellar of potatoes, a string of dried beans, a jar of lard, a starter on the counter, and a mind that held 40 things without ever writing them down. Number one is the self-fed table. It is the whole competence of feeding a family without needing a store, without needing a corporation, without needing anybody's permission. She wasn't poor, friend. She was fed, free, and beholden to nobody. That is what got taken. Not one dish. All of it at once. The miner's wife in Harlan County, she raised those 9 children on that kitchen. Every one of them lived. Her granddaughter today buys the same soup beans for $34 a bowl in Asheville and doesn't know the woman she came from. That is not forgetting. That is theft. And the thieves had a business plan. They didn't take a recipe from your family, neighbor. They took the table. They took the knowing. They took the moment a grandmother hands a spoon to a child and says, "This is how we keep ourselves." That's what we're pulling back, one plate at a time. Let me be square with you before we close out. This isn't collapse talk. I'm not selling you fear. I don't want you afraid of the grocery store, and I'm not your doctor. Some of what I showed you the health department looks at sideways, and I told you where the lines are. Everything else on that list you can make Saturday. So here's what I need you to do. Pick one. Just one. Don't try to be your great-grandmother by Sunday. You'll only quit. This week, put a pot of pinto beans on Saturday morning with a smoked ham hock. Bake 1 pan of cornbread in a cast iron skillet Saturday night. Save the bacon grease off breakfast into a jar by the stove. That's 3 plates on the table, 3 tricks back in your hands, and it cost you under $6. I put up 16 quarts of apple butter this October, the way Eli wrote it into that journal in 1953. Cost me the sugar and 1 afternoon at the paddle. Feeding me clear through winter, and I didn't scorch it this time. Tell me down below, friend, did your grandmother make any of these? Which one? What did she cook that nobody in your family makes anymore? Tell me the name of the dish and the name of the woman. The one that gets the most comments is the one I do next. Your grandmother cooked every one of these. She wasn't backward. She was fed, and she fed you. Somebody just didn't get the chance to pass her kitchen down to you. Now it's yours again. Take it. Also, You buy your bread at the store? So does most of this country. That was never your fault. They're just very good at selling. Next time I'm counting down the 2-cent pantry staples that fed a whole holler through the winter of 1936. The 10 shelf-stable ingredients my grandfather kept in white canisters lined up along the back wall of the pantry. The year the grocery chains made sure your kitchen would need 40 products instead. One of them, the food industry has spent 100 years pretending isn't food. Subscribe if you haven't yet. We are pulling this table back a plate at a time, and I don't want you to miss the next one. Comment the dish you want me to teach. I read every one of them, and the Old Man's Journal has near 200 pages left in it. Keep the old ways. They kept